Welcome to the Braemar Life Skills Academy podcast. The world is changing faster than ever, and the world of education is too. Advances in psychology, biology, and a whole range of other fields have opened up new lines of thought about the purpose of school and how it can best serve a new generation of students. Join me on the Braemar Life Skills Academy podcast every week to explore these new ideas. In last week's episode, I was joined by a number of wonderful Braemar students from Russia and Ukraine who shared their experiences, their emotions, and their hopes for the future in response to this past year of conflict. This week, I'll be speaking with the Executive Director of Toronto's Fort York Food Bank, Mrs. Julie Lejeune. Welcome back to another episode of the Braemar Life Skills Academy podcast. My name is Mike. I'm here at the Braemar College campus in downtown Toronto. I'm very happy to be joined today by Ms. Julie Lejeune. Julie is the Executive Director at Toronto's Fort York Food Bank, which is a multi-service agency dedicated to connecting individuals with their broader community. She's an experienced senior leader in the charity sector with more than 20 years of community-based development work. This experience has afforded her a deep understanding of poverty issues in Canada and globally, especially as they relate to health and nutrition. Her diverse roles and responsibilities include fundraising, developing and operationalizing strategy, and strong project management skills, including critical path, risk mitigation strategies, and project budgets. I've seen her in action. We're lucky to have her in studio. Julie, welcome to Braemar.
Thanks, Mike. Glad to be here.
We love to give our guests a chance to sort of introduce themselves and let the folks at home get to know you a little bit. I've seen you in action, as I just said, but I haven't had many chances to sit down and get to know the person. So please tell us all about yourself and especially how your background has led you to be where you are today.
Thanks. Yeah, it's a pleasure to be here. I know we just worked together on an event, which we'll talk about in a few minutes, but backing up a little bit. So yeah, I've basically been in the community development charity sector my entire career. I could back up way back to university. I studied nutrition and became a dietitian after university, did the schooling or certification for all of that. My main goal the whole time through that was going overseas and getting experience overseas and to do international nutrition. And so cut me off anytime if I'm talking too long on this. But
Go.
So I got myself to Malawi in East Africa and spent a year there working on health and nutrition programs. It was actually a Canadian-funded project. I'm from the U.S. myself, but went over to Malawi on a Canadian government-funded Anyways, the organization I was with was the project I was working on was funded by the Canadian government. So that led me to actually immigrating to Canada and working with World Vision for 14 years doing international development. So I became from a nutritionist, international nutritionist, to more of a generalist in the international development sector and spent a lot of time traveling back and forth to East Africa and then Asia, East Asia, all over Asia, basically. I've won't start listing the countries, but I've been to many of them, traveling back and forth, working on World Vision's long-term development programs.
Holy smokes! So I'm learning this stuff just
Yeah.
like you are, folks. But wow, that's incredibly impressive, and what a background for the work you do now.
Yeah, it was fun, and it was a lot of fun, and I learned a ton. And World Vision's an amazing organization. Little plug for them, but. And basically taught me about development, taught me cross-cultural, diverse skills to work with everybody and anybody. And that's when I was doing all my global work, that's how I got involved actually in the food bank, because my whole world was focused overseas, which was fun and engaging and working on big, huge topics. But I wasn't engaged in my own city. And that's when I met the folks at Fort York Food Bank and started getting involved. I was on the board for about 7 years or so before I took a short break before coming back as the employee. And my goal then was basically is to get involved at home. Poverty is everywhere, and as I was involved overseas, I wanted to be able to link it and be doing something at home as well.
It's fascinating. We talk to so many people like yourself who've ended up in positions within the Toronto community, performing incredibly important support roles, and their journeys are never the same. The trajectory is never well, I knew what I was going to do when I was 5 and I just followed the steps all the way there. It's often circuitous. It has detours. It has pitfalls. It has, early triumphs that then turn into deep valleys. And we're so lucky to have people like yourself who've ended up with this wealth of experience in a multicultural downtown Toronto setting that desperately needs you.
Yeah, it is. It's unique. And like I said, yeah, you hit it on spot. I never knew what I wanted to do. I even went to university, didn't know what I wanted to major in. I found nutrition when I got there and fell in love with it. And actually, that's an interesting story there of just taking my first Nutrition 10 course. And like I said, I grew up in the States, middle income, upper income, suburb. And I took this first Nutrition 10 course and learned for the first time that people are suffering actual diseases because of lack of micronutrients. I mean, I have to admit, I was 19 years old and didn't know that. And so that really opened my eyes to the world and wanted to do what I could, basically in the nutrition sector.
Yeah, we were lucky to have Chef Shay Mandel and a wonderful woman named Maria Solikovsky on the podcast recently. One is a chef and a children's cooking educator, and the other is a homestead gardener who runs a lot of mentoring programs for us. And both of them hit that point exactly, that it's shocking to learn the negative outcomes in the world of nutrition that are still being experienced even in the most developed countries, right? The lack of knowledge for not just young people, but for everyone about things like micronutrient deficiencies or nutrition ratios, et cetera, et cetera. And so I'm not surprised that first intrigued you and that you dove into it, and then it led to broader support work in the future. For anyone listening out there who might want to get a better sense of the type of community development, international development or domestic, and the skill sets, the qualifications, the characteristics that go into being successful in that realm, do you have any advice or any descriptions for them?
That's such a great question. I don't feel like I've even made it yet, but...
Well, let me say it then, because I've seen you in action. Sometimes we need people on the outside to tell us that we're doing a really good job. I mean, watching you run the show at Coldest Night of the Year, it was something to aspire to for me. Like I saw a leader there with, hands firmly on the reins. Yeah. So if you don't mind, tell us about the characteristics and the talents and qualifications that got you to that position.
Yeah, it's such a hard question to talk about yourself. But I think, one is patience, which my family would tell me I don't have any patience. But you have to just love working with people and love building those friendships and those networks and those connections with people and with community. Sometimes it's not a very easy job. I work with people all day long, and sometimes it's frustrating, sometimes it's hard, sometimes it's even dangerous. But it's being able to navigate that, which I guess then is what I'm talking about is resiliency. And I don't know how I learned resilience, and I don't know how someone would, but it is something to learn and to seek out and to be able to get back up and be able to process things and not let it, not let it make you quit your job or your career or your path or your passions. And again, it's sort of an aloof sort of characteristic. So I don't even know how to tell someone to get it, or how to get it, but it is really important. You need to be able to do proper, self-care or something, or know how you react in these situations to be able to continue. But even that, last December, I felt like I was drowning in my position, called up a mentor, and he lectured me for 45 minutes. I asked him for 15 minutes of his time. He lectured for me for 45 minutes about the need to take a day off. And I hadn't even seen it in myself, right? So I knew I was starting to lose my patience with my volunteers, which I don't like. So at least I had enough self-awareness to be like, hey, that's not good. I can't be yelling at people that are volunteering for me. And I wasn't taking care of myself properly. December was a really busy month. So yeah, other than that, it's funny because the other advice I got when I was, 22 and wanted to work overseas was basically get overseas experience and learn another language. I never ended up learning another language though, so I still think it's really good advice. But I ended up, it wasn't a comfortable position though, as much traveling as I did not to know anyone else's language. I have phrases in a gazillion languages, but everyone had to speak to me in English, so that was difficult. And I wish that I knew another language.
So the interpersonal skills that you're referring to across a number of different, let's say, vectors. are necessary, but there's also some danger involved in terms of diving in almost too deep and investing so heavily in the lives and the troubles of those around you that you're unable to kind of see your own operation or your own health state, let's say. And that across the board, it seems like people who have the self-awareness to recognize when they're, I don't want to say drowning, but they're having trouble swimming, and the ability to turn to a mentor, a companion, a partner, even those who are perhaps working for us or perhaps are less experienced than us, to get that kind of support. When I talked to Dr. Diana Breacher, who's she helps to run the student services department at TMU, formerly Ryerson. She's an expert in resilience, and she's been studying resilience for about 20 years. And in my talks with her and in the research I've done before and since, resilience seems to be modeled, or our perception of it seems to be modeled on the idea of a web, where you are at the center of a web, and the more interconnected you are, the more resilient you are, such that if one node is not available or goes away from you and you take a punch, or you experience a challenge, you can still kind of fall back on that nice bed spring of interconnected support systems, and you'll bounce back.
Yeah.
Right. And I saw volunteers working with you. I saw employees. We had students working with you at Coldest Night of the Year. I've had the pleasure of being at Fort York Food Bank a number of times in a couple of different capacities, and it seems like there's resilience built into the structure of the place, even almost physically. Has that been on your mind as you've developed your programs there?
Yeah, and I can't even take credit for that. It's really our former manager and our longstanding board who has built that community. And we have, you hit it on the spot, is we have an amazing community at Fort York at the food bank. I mean, people have been volunteering there for 20 years, for 5 years, 10 years. And we've built a community group there. People consider each other friends, even support networks. And I'm just lucky to be a part of it and hopefully continue on that sense of culture. I've been there full time now a year, so I guess I can say, like, yes, we've continued on that sense of culture that was established and the community that we have there.
Let's dig a little deeper. For people who aren't familiar with the Fort York Food Bank, this is a multi-service agency that, again, our students have had the pleasure and the privilege of being able to work with. We've helped to build the garden that's outside a couple summers in a row. We've helped put together food hampers. We cleaned up a basement and found quite a few treasures amongst the debris down there. That was a cool couple weeks. But what exactly is the Fort York Food Bank? What are the goals there? How do you operate?
So we are the largest food bank in downtown Toronto. So, as you know, Toronto is a city of 2.9 million. Is that about where we're at right now?
Last
GTA?
I checked, which means maybe higher now.
So we are the largest operating food bank right downtown. And we serve, right now, we are currently serving over 2,500 individuals every week. And so we have a tiny little space, but we make it work. And we have basically I'm full-time, one full-time staff, and one part-time and one very part-time staff. So less than 2 FTE equivalents.
I had no idea.
Yeah. And then about 200 volunteers running the food bank every week. We are open 7 days a week. We do a grocery service, so anyone who needs groceries can come and get free groceries Tuesday to Saturday. Sundays we do a hot takeaway meal. Mondays we do a delivery program to 180 seniors in a Toronto community housing building who with culturally appropriate food, and who many of the seniors are not mobile and could not go out and get their own groceries. And then we do hot takeaway meal. We've started just recently a breakfast meal on Tuesday mornings, and then additionally we do lunches on Friday and Saturday. So it's hopping. It's very, very busy, as you've witnessed there. And then, just the amount of, I love that, you guys cleaned the basement. Thank you. It needs to be cleaned again, actually. Someone was just down there like, whoa. And I was like, well, it was cleaned recently. And I guess that was maybe 2 years ago recently.
That's right.
It's a busy place.
Absolutely incredible. 2,500 plus served weekly.
Yes, fortunately, unfortunately, those numbers have gone up month by month since last April. So basically, a year now of month over month increasing numbers of people that we've served. It's tripled since this time in 2019, doubled from this time last year.
What happened between 2019 and 2022 that could have caused that?
Well, it's actually it's inflation.
Oh, okay.
So
Sorry,
one
I
COVID,
was
I know where you're
there,
going.
yeah.
Is COVID definitely, and inflation, just as I mean, I know all your listeners aren't in Toronto, but in Toronto, our grocery prices have increased dramatically. You and I see it at the grocery store every week. My jaw drops at the grocery store. I picked up a box of cereal that used to be $3.39. It was $4.39. A dollar increase in 1 week. And it's just, and you can't make ends meet. I might be going into more of your questions, but if you are on social assistance, if you're on OW, we call it Ontario Works, or ODSP for disability, you, as a single person or two people, you can't make ends meet in this city. Our rent is so high, housing is unaffordable, and it's hard. So we bridge the gap. Clients can come at once a week to the food bank. But we don't, and we only supply a 3 to 4 day supply of food. It's not even a week's worth of food. So this is a stopgap. It's something. It's necessary. I don't know what people would do without us, honestly.
Yeah, I don't either.
But it's not even a full week's worth of food.
And we are thankful for other groups. I think especially of Scott Mission, so close to you and doing incredible work themselves.
Yeah.
But you're right. I have this question often: how exactly are people surviving amidst these rising costs, amidst this housing crisis, amidst COVID, amidst winter?
It's hard.
Yeah.
It's hard.
But it would be a lot harder without people like yourself. My route to the building every day takes me right past Fort York Food Bank, and I regularly see the line stretching hundreds of meters out east on College Street.
Yeah.
For those who aren't familiar with the downtown Toronto community, we've just touched on some of the major challenges that they're facing. But who are these people? What makes the downtown Toronto community so unique?
The food bank community or Toronto in general?
Let's say both.
Both. I mean, Toronto in general, we're a diverse community. I think there used to be it might be a myth or an urban legend that we're the most diverse city in the world, but
for sure.
I feel like they dispelled that at some point. But anyways, we like to pride ourselves on that, as so we are very, very diverse, and lots of newcomers to Canada, and so similarly at the food bank, I can talk better about like who we see at the food bank it's everyone. It's literally everyone. It's students, it's the elderly, it's lots of newcomers, the old, the young. It's literally everybody. And sometimes it shocks me, and now I guess in a way it doesn't anymore. I've had people come to the food bank for their first time and say, okay, where are you from? And then they'll say they just arrived in Canada 2 days ago. It's like, how did you find us? Like, did someone at Pearson Airport tell you about us? Like, where is this? And but Google, literally, like, people are finding us on Google. Food bank near me, food bank in Toronto. And so I'm grateful they are. We've done something right on our website without trying. But literally, food's your first basic need, right? So you get to Toronto and you don't have anything yet, right? Yeah. And so they can come to us and at least get some groceries to get started.
And I know even more than that, you're also working to provide culturally appropriate food, which must, for a newcomer, just be what a relieving feeling they must experience when they first see not just food that's available to them, but food that represents their culture.
Hopefully, that is our goal. It's our mission, especially like halal meat. We try and say that we always have that available. It's difficult sometimes. We don't. But yeah, because you touched on a good point. It's hard. People, I've been, watch people go through and they're looking at, they don't even know what this product is. Yeah. It's got to feel so like, I mean, I've traveled, right? So I actually love going into grocery stores when I travel and see the differences. But so that's difficult, and it must be very unsettling too. It's as much as it's food, it's not food you recognize. Yeah. But that said, we do try and do like, we have meat always available. We have fresh produce always available. So even if you don't recognize some of the package items that we might have here in Canada, we have fresh produce and rice and pasta. So
awesome. I mean, we run the cooking club once a week here, and we've got maybe 40 students who participate each week, and I've seen that look on their faces when the whatever it is that we're cooking comes out in front of them and they've never seen it. Or my conversation with the young guy last week about why we weren't putting chicken in our jollof rice, and he said, "How can you suffer in this way?" I'm like, "You want to talk about suffering? Let's talk about the chickens." But always interesting, and always kind of a wake up call to realize how important it is for people who've just arrived here, people who still hold their home cultures so close to their identities, to see them represented even in small ways, whether it's, recognizable language or popular culture or food, and how unsettling it can be when you don't experience that. The reason I had you on originally, the reason I thought of inviting you here, not just because you're brilliant and wonderful, and I've seen you in action, but we just completed a pretty cool project, and Braemar students played their small role, and you played the much bigger one, Coldest Night of the Year. I'll just give a very, very short summary to my knowledge, and then maybe you can help me fill in all the details. A nationwide initiative dedicated for raising money in recognition of the fact that we have people who are vulnerable and houseless regularly on the streets in the midst of, nobody's surprised to hear, some pretty nasty conditions. Canada has some pretty tough winters, regularly pushing negative 20 degrees. It's dangerous and inhospitable, and supporting these people is one of the most fundamental things we can do to raise up our community. Fort York Food Bank itself was able to raise more than $100,000, and last I checked, the national number was something like
$12.5 million.
$12.5 million. I mean,
Canadians are generous.
Yeah, thank goodness for that. It was a lot of fun. There were a lot of people. It was a vibrant night. Can you just tell us about what it was like producing this event, and how did it go for you?
Yeah, thank you. First off, I have to really thank you and your students. You're critical to the night's success. It was a very big event for a small agency to put on, and we are extremely grateful to your leadership and your students who came out and braved the cold for the food bank. So basically, so you hit it. It's a national event where smaller agencies like ourselves, who are working in the sector for those experiencing hurt, hunger, and homelessness, it's a fundraising event to raise money, raise awareness, and raise money for these agencies. So this was our second year participating. You've participated twice with us, both years with your students. And last year, our goal was to raise $30,000. We raised $68,000. So this year we set a huge goal to raise $100,000, and we're at $104,000 right now. So
I got to tell you, and I hope you take this in the right way. When I saw the goal for this year compared with last year's, I kind of went, we'll see.
Lots of people did, and they're only telling me now.
But I mean, that's the purpose of a goal, right? It was motivational, and I don't know that we would have gotten there if that wasn't your vision for it.
Yeah, well, I can't take all the credit. I actually first thought, really? But I was like, okay, let's do it. And I had another board member who was, David, was basically like, we can do it. Let's do it. And it was inspirational. And that's what a goal should be, right? So it was inspirational. And honestly, though, our community is absolutely fabulous. Our local community, the community of Toronto, just really has our back. They are there to support us, and in any capacity, really. So either by volunteering or by donating. And I am feeling extremely grateful for our community right now.
It makes me proud. I mean, I try to convey this to our students as often as possible, and to prospective parents. Like, this is, we are not a simple community. Not everything is going perfectly here, but there is real life and real capital C community. There's resilience and empathy to be found here. And we see examples of it every day. Very lucky. Can you just...
Forgot to say what the event was.
Yeah, I was going to say, please go into more detail.
It's basically it's a 5K or a 2K or a 5K walk from the food bank, basically putting ourselves out there to experience the cold in Canada. It's a minor example of what those living on the streets or experiencing hunger experience, but it's a physical way to put yourself out there. So basically, people are raising money to walk for the food bank. So we all gather together on one night, and it's across Canada at the same time on the same night that we all gather. And so this year we had almost 300 walkers from our building, which was a very small building. That was my most stressful part. I was like, how are we going to fit 300 people in here? But it worked. It worked. We made it work. We then had a great MC who's one of our volunteers, a newcomer to Canada. He was amazing. We had all 3 levels of government represented to come and kick off the night, and a great DJ. It ended up being a really fun night, and went and walked 5K. Where you guys came in, shout out again to you, is the students basically were the route marshals all along the route on that 5K and 2K route. So they really took one for the team, standing out in the cold for hours to make sure people went the right way on the route. So, and we came back to the food bank and had a meal together. There was chili and cornbread and cookies, all donated by volunteer chefs and volunteer businesses, and it was a very successful night, and I'm very grateful for everyone's help.
I was going to say, it seemed like I was in the midst of it, and I was just kind of going around trying to check on everybody on the route for those hours. It seemed like it went so smoothly. It seemed like it went all to plan, and I was hoping to get you in studio and have that confirmed.
It did. Yeah. Luckily, thankfully, and I had a great leadership team that put this on together. I think there was 6 of us or 8 of us on the team that pulled this event off. Again, all volunteers except for myself and then the one woman who worked 16 hours a week and helped me plan this event. So great leadership team. Everyone was in it 100%, and it's a really fun. I love this event. It's fun. It's fairly easy to plan because of also the support of being a national event too. Yeah. So.
I mean, it's a great idea. It's a really intuitive idea, right? Like how do you generate empathy better than by putting yourself or others in the exact position of those you're trying to help, right? We had to kind of catch ourselves, myself and my students. There was that sneaking sense in the midst of it of like, oh well, it's so cold out, right? Like my shoes are wet, right? And we were lucky to have a representative from Covenant House come and talk to us about youth homelessness a couple months ago, and just kind of walk through the steps of like, this is not a series of catastrophic decisions that were made by a person. This is something that has happened to them, and and they kind of giving several examples so that our students could appreciate, oh, this could happen to anyone. This could happen to me. And so talking to the students as I made my stops along the way into how you doing, right? And it wasn't always, we're doing great. We're super happy out here, right? It's cold and wet and dark. And they loved it when the groups went past, and we obviously had them hand warmers and foot warmers, and we were taking enough care of them that we knew that they were safe. But it was important to remind them like, hey, yeah, that's kind of the point, right? And I was pleased that especially people who may come from countries or climates that don't have this as a challenge that faces them. They have other challenges for sure, but negative 20 degrees is not one of them. It's cool for them to be able to see what these people face and be able to generate empathy in that way. And so I thank you very, very much for doing this for our community, but especially for allowing our students to be a part of it.
Oh, and thank you. Hopefully you'll come back next year.
We sure will. Yeah, we're committed
no one
to
was too cold that they're not going to come back, or tell the future students.
Yeah, exactly. We won't tell them. And if you need help with that basement, you know where to call. Goals for the future. What's next for Fort York Food Bank?
So we've been around for 25 years. Fortunately, unfortunately, I always say, and honestly, I think we'll be here another 25. We wish we weren't. We should be working ourselves out of a job. But at the rate things are going in our city or province, country, I think we will be. So our mission and vision is to reconnect people with their community. So we kind of lost some of that during COVID, where we had to just hand groceries out the front door. We couldn't have the number of volunteers inside. We couldn't have the clients inside. So we lost a lot of that community aspect that we value so much. So that's top on our priority right now, to really get back to our vision statement of reconnecting people with our community. So much more than just food. So we are really trying to, so every client that comes in has to check in before they get their food. So we're basically under a database system so we know who's coming, we know our numbers. That's how I know we have 2,500 a week. But that's an opportunity to help someone. Looking through like, oh, did you know you can get this benefit or that benefit, or do you need help with this or that? housing, legal, taxes. There's so many other issues people that are living in poverty are facing. Food is just one of them, and may bring them to us first, but we want to make sure they're connected with their community. And so that's where we've recently hired my colleague Melissa, who's working 16 hours a week, to really build up, we call it our advocacy program, to really build that up. So that's our one of our current goals really right now for the near future, is to build that up a little bit more and make sure we're doing all we can for our clients.
Wonderful. For the young people out there who may see you and see the work that you do and say to themselves, I can see challenges in my own home community. I grew up around people who need this kind of help. There can be a feeling of helplessness that maybe we as adults play a role in instilling in teenagers, this idea that, oh, you can get serious about the world a couple years from now. But my experience with them is that they're ready to help now. And our responsibility should be to be conduits for that. Can you think of ways, or do you, perhaps have you seen examples of ways in which a young person, a 15, 16-year-old, may be able to play an influential role in the support of their own communities?
Yeah, I see it all the time. I see the challenges with it, and I see it all the time when it goes well, too. It's get involved. Don't let anyone tell you not to, right? Just do it. Grab a friend. If you see a need, do it. Talk to a leader in your community. Talk to a teacher. Talk to someone with your ideas, and keep pushing, and don't let anyone tell you no. From small things to big things, even, small, quote unquote, I might call small like a lemonade stand, but that's not. You can raise money. So I'm in awe of those kids that just keep going despite maybe adults in their life saying, no, you can't, or in a few years or something. That said, I would like to do more at Fort York, is to get more students involved. My current struggle is our hours. We're only, most days, except for Saturday and now Friday, which is very recent, we're closed during the student hours. So that's what I'm trying to figure out, how we can be a better partner with these students, to get them more involved after hours somehow, without me working 12-hour days.
Yeah, I was going to say.
So working on that. But that said, I have students that have come on their PA days, have come during the summer, and it's like, keep emailing. A lot of these organizations are run by very few staff like us. So if you don't hear from me, email me again. Keep being persistent, because a lot, and I'm not alone in that. I know other small organizations and volunteers have told me, like, they never heard back from an organization that they emailed and wanted to volunteer. And it's honestly, I think it's not that you weren't wanted, it's just they don't have time to even respond to some of those emails. So be persistent, stop in, whatever. I mean, because some of my high school students are the best volunteers, and I've got one woman now, she's off on a internship in France right now, but I can't wait for her to come back in this summer. So it's like, you can, there's ways to stand out, and there's ways to get involved. And ask questions, get to know people, and just don't take no for an answer.
Yeah, I think there's a sense with a lot of, let's say, organizations, that when you're on the outside looking in, it looks like there's going to be a full process of integrating, and I'm going to have to go through an interview process, I'm going to have to send an application, I'm going to have to meet 3 or 4 different people before I figure out how I can begin contributing. And then so often you show up and you're in. Right? Yeah. There's a role for you, and suddenly you're meeting clients and putting faces to names, and suddenly you're on hand when someone needs something done. And from the outside looking in, you're indistinguishable from the operation of that organization. I remember I thought it was a really cool idea. My dad had done it in the past. I wanted to help out with the Special Olympics when I was in high school. And I looked at it, and it seemed like this very complex, big organization. And it is in some ways. And that idea kept me from really reaching out to Special Olympics or thinking that this was a possibility, until I found out that there was a Special Olympic practice at the primary school gym in my neighborhood, and I literally just showed up, right? And they were like, "Oh, you have basketball experience? Great. The more the merrier. We can use all the help we can get."
Awesome.
And
Good for you.
I was in, right? And I don't know how good it was for me. It was more accidental or spontaneous than anything else.
But you showed up. You showed up.
Well, and I hope that message gets across, that maybe I did send an email to Fort York Food Bank once or twice and didn't get one back. But I met May Tagnathasa one time, and I had my contact, and all of a sudden there was stuff for us to do, and now now you're in studio with me, and,
Yeah.
and we've done Coldest Night of the Year twice, and things are happening, right? For our students, we're connected.
Yeah.
It's a strange thing how connection happens, but I don't think it's nearly there aren't as many barriers to it as I think sometimes are perceived.
You're right. And then on the flip side, there's probably 100 people that haven't heard back from me as well. So again, it's just that being persistent and patient with the leaders that are there, because it's, like I said, like I can't necessarily keep up with all the emails or that, but yeah, eventually, and be like, because you were patient away, you probably did email. We didn't have the good systems in the past necessarily, but then when you finally met May and got connected, and here we are. So it's being persistent.
Yeah, that's great advice. For the folks who want to know more, may want to get involved, may want to be persistent and join in, where can people nearby find out more about you, find out more about the Fort York Food Bank, and maybe even some of your, I know you're involved in community support initiatives outside of Fort York Food Bank as well. How do we find out more?
For the food bank, visit us at www.fyfb.com. Sorry, say that again. Visit us at fyfb.com. Pretty much everything should be on the website. Our email, you can reach me, is at info at fyfb.com. I get all those emails, so we do have a waiting list for volunteers. Don't all come flooding in right now. But reach out. If you're interested in coming in, reach out. Go through the website, and I'll send you another Google form as our process, and then from there we see when we have an opening, we invite people in. Because there's a lot of turnover, so you will hear from us eventually, hopefully. That's the best way.
Cool. Good to know. Well, from myself, from the students of Braemar, from the people in our community who rely on you for their daily well-being, thank you so much. Thank you for joining me today. Thank you for your message and for your ongoing efforts. They mean the world.
Appreciate it. Thanks so much.
Sure. It's been the Braemar Life Skills Academy podcast. Thrilled to have another great guest like Julie on, and we're going to keep the good conversations going in the future. Tune in again next week. We'll see you then. Be sure to join me next week, where I'll be speaking with one of my favorite people on the planet, Dr. Dina Kara Schaefer. Dr. Schaefer is the Director of Student Services at York University, an expert when it comes to engagement with nature and the implications for learning and retention on students and all things learning strategy. It is an episode not to be missed, so don't.